Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. Our next guest is Marcos Buscaglia, and he is an economist and former Wall Street analyst and emerging markets expert. He has more than 30 years doing research on economies and emerging market countries and advising Wall Street companies. He is also emerging as a leading voice on the topic of markets and democracy. He was a speaker at Oslo Freedom Forum for 2022 and 2023 on the impact of foreign investment on democracy and human rights. In fact, he has even written a book about the topic, Beyond the ESG Portfolio, and how Wall Street can help democracies survive. So why don't we bring him on the show and let's hear about how Wall Street can help democracies survive and what deep effects does economy have on human rights and how they play out in our countries. So, welcome to the show, Marcus.
Thank you.
How does Wall Street help democracy survive, and what kind of big effects does economy have on human rights?
Well, the fact is that it has been helping democracies to deteriorate, I would say, in the last decades. If you there has been a democratic recession. Let's start with that for our audience to be on attuned with what we're talking about. Since the year 2005, 2006, all the institutions that track the state of democracy in the world, like Freedom House and VDEM and the Economist Intelligence Unit, have been tracking that there has been a democratic decline. You saw it very clearly in countries like Russia, like Venezuela, Hungary, Turkey, and even in some autocratic countries like China, they became more autocratic, particularly since Xi Jinping, became president in the year 2013. So basically, there has been a democratic recession, and at the same time, there have been massive portfolio flows to emerging market countries, and so what I do in the book is to interrelate stories of what was happening with democracy in different countries like Russia, Turkey, Hungary, Venezuela, and what was happening with markets. And what you see is that basically, for all practical purposes, markets were oblivious to this deterioration of democracy. And they were financing the governments, and they were financing companies associated to these governments, like Gazprom in Russia or like PDVSA in Venezuela, at the same time at which democracy was deteriorating in these countries. Let's take the case. So it's full of stories. First, the first part of the book,
okay,
to see the interrelation. Let me tell you, one story we are saddened by the murder or death of Alexei Navalny in Russia, and basically he started to be persecuted and jailed, I think in the year 2011, when he was first arrested in a demonstration against the results of a legislative election in Russia. And then he was jailed again, and then he was out, and then he was jailed again. There was a murder attempt, but there was a murder attempt on him on 2020. But if you look at what happened with the market exposure to Russia, it really, the day of the reckoning was only the day of Russia's invasion to Ukraine in 2022. Not even in 2014. Markets shuddered, and yes, there was a reduction and some capital outflows, but by the time of Russia's invasion to Ukraine in 2022, total exposure of Western financial institutions to Russia was about $170 billion. It wasn't small. So I don't want to say that they were totally oblivious, the financial markets, but they were oblivious at some point, because basically there were investment in bonds, there were investment in the equity of companies that were pawns of the government, of Putin's government, like Gazprom. So basically my point is markets have helped in the democratic recession that we have seen in the last couple of decades.
Well, I know that, for example, with Russia, that a large number of NATO countries were completely dependent on them for fuels to run. They were dependent on them for things like natural gas, for heating homes and things like that, especially countries like Poland and Germany. They were, so when the invasion of Ukraine happened, they had to find a new source because the U.S. was placing sanctions against Russia for invading Ukraine. So right there, that's an economic effect, because if you have to find new resources, that's part of your economy to divert those resources from one place to another, right?
Well, but that brings to the fore, I think, another topic of importance, that is that when a Western investors finance autocracies, and I will then want to elaborate on how this happens and why. Okay. But when they do that, the impact of that is not limited sometimes to the border of the autocratic country or the country that is becoming autocratic. So we saw that very clear in the Russia case. Mm-hmm. So Russia's invasion of Ukraine had a very negative impact on Europeans, particularly. But in the whole global economy, energy prices and fuel prices rose, and agricultural prices rose for all the world population, and so it had bad effect on the whole world. Second example related to this, we are seeing in the U.S. an immigration crisis, and if you look at the new entrants are to a large extent people from Venezuela. Venezuela is the biggest humanitarian disaster in history, in a country that has not been has not had a war or a civil war. And so there are millions of Venezuelans that have emigrated in the last years. And first they went to other countries in Latin America, but now they're going in scores to the US. So you're an American investor, you think, oh, well, nothing will happen. Well, yes, things are happening in your own border. And third, an issue which I think is very important, that is the exposure of investors, both in the equity market, but particularly in the fixed income market, has increased to China significantly in the last years. And that was because, for the simple reason that before 2013, they were barred, for the most part, to invest in Chinese equities or Chinese government bonds. And over time, the Chinese government has been opening these borders. So there are massive inflows, and China has been added to some investment indexes, which I want to elaborate more on this, which most investors track. So when China is added to that index, you as an institutional investor have to have more bonds of China or more equity of China. So that has happened in the last years. And at the same time, we have seen an increasing role of China in the global stage. And that has been a negative role, in the sense that it has been prodding non-democratic countries in Africa and Latin America. It has been basically, pushing a competitive view of how the world should be organized to the liberal order, liberal not in the American sense, but in the European sense, liberal order that has been prevalent since the aftermath of the Second World War. And so this increasing cloud, China has had an increasing cloud, and that has coincided with Western investors, maybe the teachers, where you live, the teachers' pension fund, I don't know for a fact. I'm just making, assuming they have increased their exposure to China. So that's it. So the point that I want to make is, sometimes the effect of investing in autocracy is not limited to the border of that country. It can have effect even where you're living.
Yeah, that depends on I guess, especially when you're talking about with China now, that and say if the teachers union, their pension was invested in China, it depends on how the money's flowing, right?
Sorry, I didn't get that. I didn't get
how
the question.
It has an effect on the effect locally is dependent on how the money is flowing between the two countries.
Well, no, money has been flowing from Western investors, including Canada, to China, right?
Right.
So that's a fact.
Yeah.
There's no dispute over that. What China does with that money, right, is also clear. It is increasing its clout, propaganda, using pseudo think tanks to spread the word of the Chinese Communist Party, indoctrinating, public officials in countries like in many countries in Africa, working against the liberal order in institutions like the United Nations. So it's clear. But most people probably don't even know that they're investing in autocracies. And why is that? Because the savings, and that's the quote unquote funny, not funny, but interesting part of this is that most of the time you either invest through your pension fund, so you don't really know what is going on there, or to a limited extent, or you invest through if you have some certain wealth, you give your money to a financial advisor. And that financial advisor will put your money in mutual funds or ETFs. Well, I will tell you what it is, each one. And then, or you do it yourself. You invest your money through, companies. You put your money, your savings in companies, I don't know, like, Fidelity, Vanguard, etc. And you invest directly in stocks or bonds or through ETFs. And these ETFs and mutual funds, which are investment vehicles, track indices. Right. And those indices, for instance, in the bond market, in the government bond market, the most popular indices are the ones by JP Morgan. So the most tracked one in emerging markets is what called the ENVI, JP Morgan's ENVI and ENVI Diversified. And there are several alternatives to this, And these indices include non-democratic countries, a lot of them. So when you buy an ETF is an investment vehicle that you can buy with a click of your mouse. And that instead of buying, let me tell you the most popular ones. The most popular ones are the ones that track the S&P 500, the biggest 500 companies in the US market, right? So instead of you buying pieces of the, by yourself, you just buy this thing called ETF, like trades like a stock, and the people managing that ETF will buy chunks of the 500 companies. So it's very, very convenient. ETF are growing, are the most important, now investment vehicles. So there are several ETFs dedicated to emerging markets, bonds and stocks. Well, both of them include autocratic countries. For instance, if you buy the most popular ETF that invests in stocks in emerging markets, most of them have roughly 30% of Chinese companies. So you're investing in China, and you probably don't know it.
30% is huge.
It's huge, yes.
Yeah. That's, I mean, most people think, 30%, that's less than 50%. But when you consider the breakdown that maybe some of the other companies, there's 10% here, 10% there, 30% is a huge chunk to see in one particular area like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that most people don't realize it because it's hidden behind the veil of it says emerging market mutual fund or something like that most people don't realize that they're putting their money into China or an autocratic country at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what's happening. So there is a way, for instance, there is a site called thefunddictators.org that was launched by the Human Rights Foundation, where you can put the name of an emerging markets stock ETF, and they will tell you the composition of the ETF in terms of country allocation. So they will tell you, well, this ETF invests like 30% in China, X% in, Saudi Arabia, whatever.
Mm-hmm. So with all this happening, we're seeing like in the U.S. right now that the elections are coming around and everything, and the politicians have to know kind of where this investment money is going and everything. So when they're talking about, let's build a greater America, greater this, why aren't they talking about pulling some of the money back into other democracies instead of putting it into these autocratic governments?
Yeah, it's a problem. I think again, let me put it this way. What I want to do with the book, at least, is to, in the very first instance, is to raise awareness that this is happening, because most people don't realize it is happening. So I see myself and some people that is working in the same lines, along the same lines as the people in the, environmentalists were like 20 or 30 years ago. When I started in this business, I'm an economist, but have always been linked to the financial sector in some way. And when I started, I don't remember people talking about ESG and green bonds. I mean, that was not on the agenda. And through the basically through activism, and this has become mainstream now. And if you look at the numbers, this number has it's some months old, but it's still valid. I think 1 out of 2 assets that are professionally managed in Europe are under some ESG mandate, and 1 out of 3 in the US. for people to understand, ESG is this acronym for environmental, social, and governance. This is all like a way to integrate into your investment decisions not only the financial part of a company or a government, but also what is the impact on the environment, on social issues and governmental issues. And ESG is under a lot of debate now and I would say controversy, but it is mainstream. And it was not mainstream 20 to 30 years ago. And I think that, yes, the environmental problems, I think they are a problem and they should be addressed, but the democratic decline is also a problem and it's not addressed. So I think, we should do something. And banks and investment companies will not incorporate this, into their investment decisions unless there is pressure from investors.
So, how do we put the pressure on to make the banks and investment companies move in a direction that helps improve democracy and helps improve environmental decisions?
Well, spread the word. I think that by listening to this podcast and commenting this and I think that's the way, spreading the word. And there are forums in which this is debated. For instance, the Human Rights Foundation has this Oslo Freedom Forum every year, and I have been there for 2 years already with discussion on this. So let's make this mainstream, and making it mainstream is by spreading the word that I think this is a problem. If you start telling your financial advisor that you think that this is a problem, there will be more pressure, for companies to take action.
And that makes sense, and that's also part of having a growing democracy is the people's opinion taking the forefront and not just the banks or the government's opinion taking the forefront, right?
Yeah.
So, you wrote the book, and how do we get a hold of your book, and maybe have people contact you so that they can learn more about your work and how you want to help build better democracies and better environments in our world?
Yeah, the book is now available in the U.S. through I'd say Amazon, Barnes and Noble, the sites, both in hardcover and Kindle version. So I think that if you are in Canada, you should be able to get it through Amazon or Barnes and Noble or in your Kindle. Or I say Kindle, but generally like your electronic reading device. So it is available. It has been available for almost a month now, and I think it will be. The hard copies will start to be sold outside the U.S. in some time. I'm not sure about that, but most likely it will.
Okay. All right. And you also have a website, right?
Yes. You can see my website is Marcos, Marcos, Buscaglia, B as in boy, U, S as in Sam, C as in cat, A, G as in Georgia, L as in Larry, IA.com. And that you can see the latest news. I have a blog where I post, my blog posts are related to events that I see. I mean, I have no time, to be honest. I read the, Financial Times and another Bloomberg, other financial media. I see so many news that could be related to what I'm writing, so that I don't even have time to post. But for instance, the last one was about Navalny and how, in spite of Navalny already being, persecuted and the opposition being obliterated by Putin's regime, investors didn't care up until the invasion of Ukraine. And then you can see other posts related to what happened in Turkey and what happened in different countries recently.
Yeah. Well, on Navalia, one I did see something recently saying that his wife is continuing his work and his fight, which I think is commendable. But other thing is, I don't think people realize that there was a report from another news agency that, and they're also independent from the bigger corporations, where the reporter stood in this road, this trucking road that led from Kiev. It also led towards Moscow, but it also led directly to Turkey. So all these countries are interconnected, and we need to understand how they're interconnected so that we can understand better with our investments and everything. True.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah.
Definitely.
So anyway, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, and let's help bring awareness to this economic problem and help bring about the incline, or the build a better democracy around our world, right?
Yeah. I'm sure that over time this will be a bigger issue because people do care about democracy,
Mm-hmm.
and again, in as much as the concern about the environment led to a response from the financial industry, I think that over time we have to be patient. There will be a response related to this as well.
All right. Thank you again, Marcus.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you for listening today. You've been listening to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. Please find that subscribe button wherever it may be on your screen. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.